Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 249th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. In the KMF Collective Studio with me today, I have founder of Tennis Lady and former collegiate volleyball player, Allie Svabik. How you doing, Allie?
I'm doing great, Katie. Super flattered to be here. As a big fan of your podcast, so thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of yours, obviously. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me. And so, Allie, to get to know you and know your background a little bit with specifically your journey through sports, can you share with us a little bit about where you grew up and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
Yes. And can I just say, I know you asked this to all your listeners.
Yeah.
I think this should be the first question of every job interview, because this is exactly what I want to talk about right away.
Love it.
Instead of that, like, tell me about yourself stuff that
Right.
no one knows really how to answer.
Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question, Atlanta is definitely home for me. We moved down here when I was 7. But before that, I was born in Indianapolis. And then shortly after, we moved to Chicago. So my first childhood sports memories are rooting for Reggie Miller and the Pacers and Michael Jordan and the Bulls, because those NBA teams were, the teams back then. And, sports were always on in the house. And then it being the Midwest, it's, really flat. So I remember my mom being super active, and, right away, like, we had the seat on the back of the bike that I could ride on the back of her bike. And then we upgraded to the Burley trailer, which I don't know if you know what those are, but those are like the cars that you pull behind the bike. And,
there you go.
or you can detach them and push them. I thought they were so cool. We would do either have the screen on or do drop top, convertible style. But so we were just always out and doing that and riding bikes, and was immediately put on training wheels. And then, there was a bunch of boys that would always be shooting hoops in the cul-de-sac and riding their bikes. And, just one day wanted to drop the training wheels. And I think I was 3 years old, and just started pedaling around, racing with them. And, really just enjoyed being outside and being active. And then when I was 5, my brother was born. So that was a perfect, forever buddy to play catch with. And,
Aww.
we would set up hockey in the driveways, and because Mighty Ducks was real big at the time, and we'd be rollerblading around and trying to be the Mighty Ducks. So,
Heck yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just sports always on and always being played from a very early age.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, in so many ways, having it shape your childhood and, of course, bring you to where you are today. And then, too, from, of course, your mom, having that leader to look up to as a fitness role model. But then, too, when your brother came along, being able to really kind of foster that and build that bond with him. And so, Allie, I mean, playing all those different sports and taking a hand at them, when did volleyball enter the picture? Was it not till later?
Yeah, not till later. So I think, I guess in terms of sports, I did t-ball and soccer like everyone did. Got really into basketball, but the very first organized thing I did was dance. And my mom, signed me up for it, and I was a huge tomboy. So that was sort of not something I naturally gravitated to, but I always went, and I always let her continue to sign me up. And so I was doing that simultaneously, trying all these sports out as well, all the way through 8th grade. So I'm just, now that I can cut a rug at a wedding on the dance floor and not be embarrassed about it, I'm grateful that she sort of had the wherewithal to do that. And yeah, so I like I said, I kind of tried everything. And I liked soccer a lot. I played that through middle school, but I really got into basketball and played basketball all the way up until my sophomore year. I made the varsity team in high school. But yeah, like got into AAU and everything like that. So that was kind of my first love, was basketball.
Yeah.
And then for volleyball, that came along. I always knew I wanted to play basketball and volleyball because that's what my mom played. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Basketball, volleyball, it makes sense. All the tall girls do it, But when I was in middle school, they were just getting started, like putting together a volleyball program. That we had basketball at the school and soccer. And I always remember being like super excited to play a sport for your school versus just like in the park league or something like that.
Yeah.
So when we started going to Catholic school, we had the chance to do that. And yeah, so then they were trying to add a volleyball program, and I took it home to my mom one day and I was like, hey, they're looking for a coach. Do you want to do it? And, at that time, like, there were definitely moms that volunteered a lot and you always saw around. And my mom was a single parent, and she was commuting back and forth to New Jersey for her job. So it was a big ask of her to do that. And she said, yeah. And so she was coaching our school team, which was basically like just kind of introducing us all to volleyball.
Wow.
But I remember like it was when Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again album had just come out. And so she would bring like the boombox into the gym and like put on the CD and like play Stronger while we would like stretch and warm up to her,
yes.
like, little instruction. And it was a blast. It was all the girls that I played basketball and soccer with, and we all went to school, together, and they were like, oh, your mom's so cool. And yeah, so that's kind of how I first got introduced to volleyball. And then like seeing the high school scene was like a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
But that's how it first started.
Man, that's such a cool story. I love it. I mean, seeing that in your mom, that she was obviously doing so much, but then saying yes to being a coach for you in this new sport that you wanted to take a hand at, that you were really excited about. And so having those memories now that of course carried you through those different, sports transitions in your life. And so when you started to play volleyball, Allie, at that time, did you know or have aspirations to try and continue on in either basketball or volleyball to the next level at college or beyond that? Or was it really just focusing on playing those two sports in high school?
That's a great question. I mean, I would have loved to be like a 3-sport athlete, 5-sport athlete, like whatever they would let me do. Right.
Yeah.
But at that time, definitely the trend was to like start to specialize. And, I get it. Like every coach wants your full attention on their sport and doesn't want you getting injured doing other things. Although I do think there's tremendous value in playing multiple sports and learning different sports and, increasing your sports IQ and your awareness of, the ball and the other players on the court, and, just that whole spatial recognition that you might not get, just from learning the routines of one game. But anyway, so yeah, I remember kind of when that whole middle school volleyball thing was starting, we would go to these tournaments and watch the Catholic high schools play. And, at that point I'd been in like feeder basketball programs, thinking I was going to go to this one high school because it was a little bit closer, a little bit newer. And, I was there with my mom and we were watching all these teams play, and she was like pointing to the Marist team, which is a school here in Atlanta, and making note of how, and she just said like, that's the team you got to play on, like, because they, would come to the middle after every point. And for those that aren't familiar with volleyball, or maybe only, watch on the Olympics, but, obviously there's no clock. And so, at the end of each point, you kind of reset and, part of the culture, or at least part of the culture that you try to instill in your team, is that every point, win or lose, all the team members are coming to the middle, and they're making contact in like a little huddle, just to kind of like stay as a unit and stay together. Because then you go back to your set positions before the start of the ball to not break the rotation boundaries and things like that. So once she pointed that out, and then later on in my career, and I realized that that's not something that naturally just happens with every team, I really grew to appreciate that. And the program that Marist was known for, I guess, at the time, and still is today. So that was kind of my first indication, like, whoa, she's willing to invest in the money and the time, and hopefully I can get into this school, and they have just a tremendous athletic program, and this would be awesome. Yeah. So kind of started doing their camps and their feeder programs on both the basketball and volleyball side. But yeah, I mean, because their volleyball program was so established, and that school in particular is 7th grade through 12th grade, and I would have been going in as a 9th grader, because they accept new applicants in 9th grade and then in 7th grade. Mm-hmm. And so kind of walking into a situation where a lot of these girls had been playing 2 years together in a very good program. I made the 9th grade team, and I made this JV team as a sophomore, but I was making varsity right away on the basketball side in high school. Yeah. So it was kind of a different dynamic. Like my goal became making the school's volleyball team. I wasn't even really thinking about next level or club volleyball, which wound up being, what needed to happen. I was just thinking about, okay, I'm going to still play basketball because, I want to play sports, and they're giving me my letter jacket. And, but yeah, like always wanting to join the varsity team, which was contending for state championships year after year. Man. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense, of course, looking back, knowing at that time you wanted to just achieve that next goal that you had for yourself. So, okay, getting on the team first and foremost, and then remaining on both teams, being able to pursue both of those passions, that newfound passion in volleyball and that one that your first love in basketball, and being able to in tandem work on both of those sports. And so as Allie, you started to get really into volleyball and continue down your path as a basketball player, coming up on graduation from high school and looking towards the collegiate level, did you have to make a decision between which sport you wanted to play, or how did that next phase start to look?
Yeah. So my sophomore year, I played varsity basketball, and then, in pursuit of trying to make the high school team, my mom realized, like, all these girls are playing club. You got to play club. Mm. So that's where we went next. I started taking group lesson sessions from Bob Westbrook, who's well known as being a leader of volleyball in the Southeast. And then him and Phil Bush were starting this new club. So I was taking lessons from Bob, and then went to these tryouts for this new club, but clearly, like, everyone had kind of established that this was going to be like the new club that, if you wanted to really be serious with volleyball in Atlanta, you should play for. So the club's called A5, and, I went out to tryouts, and I made a team my 16th year, which in hindsight is, a big year, for anyone trying to make it to the next level in any sport, but in volleyball at least. But that wasn't even on my radar. Like, I was just trying to get on a team and play more to make the high school team. So I wound up being placed on a 16s team that was like the second level team. I mean, now they have a gazillion because the demand is there. But, before then you would kind of have like your premier team that, they thought could really compete for some national championships, and then like the other teams after that. So it's sort of like second string, I guess, if you will. But yeah, so we would travel around to these convention centers all around the country where there'd be like thousands of indoor volleyball courts planted and play. And it was a blast. And, I always remember, like, obviously anyone investing the money and time to playing club probably is trying to eventually have it pay off in the form of a college scholarship. So they would always have like information sessions for parents and athletes, about college and the next level and what's the process and things like that. And Phil Bush, came up to my mom and was like, why isn't Allie going to any of the information sessions for college? And she's like looking at him like, well, she's just trying to make the high school team. Like, that's why we're here. She can't make Mary's team. And yeah, so that kind of was like the first thing that planted the seed that like maybe, you can get a scholarship and play at the next level, but it wasn't like something I was bound and determined to make happen. I think at that point, you think of the schools that you always dream to going to. And, for any kid growing up in Catholic school, you got like the Notre Dames and the Boston colleges, like any well-known Catholic school is, kind of what's top of line, but so is every other kid in the nation thinking the same thing.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of had to always just had that in my mind, and didn't really realize the sports side of it could be a possibility, which I'm super grateful for, to even like be around an environment that would foster that. Because I think, it wasn't long before that, like pre-Title IX, when that wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. I know my mom would tell stories about her driving around to the different universities in the Midwest, and, there'd be hundreds of girls in a gym, and they were competing for one spot on a team. And that's how you got on the college, volleyball team. So to have like this whole, industry basically set up to funnel that is pretty cool. I'm just glad that was in my era to be introduced to.
Yeah. I mean, really that it's true. I mean, thinking back on one, having then the experience of your mom to rely on and helping her guide you through that, but then of course, being grateful for then the opportunities that could be presented as, as a young female athlete looking forward, and then having those aspirations to potentially continue on at that next level at college for basketball, volleyball, both, whatever the sport was that you chose to do next. And then two, having your coach, kind of plant that seed of, well, you should be going to those information sessions. You should learn more about college and that next step, because that really is a feasible possibility for you looking forward.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone needs an advocate, you either advocate for yourself or for others, in every aspect of life. And that for sure was what, him and his wife, Anna Bush, is actually newly appointed the head coach of the Marist volleyball team. Wow. So it was kind of cool. They were just, and she was coached by Bob Westbrook in college. So the three of them, were just so influential in not only helping me excel in the sport, but really, opening up those doors of, the possibility to play in college. Mm-hmm. So I played, varsity basketball and club volleyball. My sophomore year, I would go from basketball practice to volleyball practice, and it was crazy. And then, the fall came around, and I made the varsity volleyball team in high school as a junior. Yeah. And then it was sort of like, okay, I can't do them both. Mm-hmm. I can't play volleyball year round and then still be on the varsity basketball team. It's just too much of a time commitment. Yeah. And it was tough to give up basketball, but, I think it was getting a little bit too physical for me at that time. I through AAU was like breaking my nose, and you'd be fighting for a basketball and people would be biting you in the leg. And,
What kind of basketball did you play?
Oh my gosh, I'll never forget the bite marks on the thigh after going for a jump ball.
That's crazy.
Yeah, my mom was livid.
I bet.
And then in high school, I mean, I'm tall, but I didn't want to be in the post. I'd prefer to be like a 3, floating around on the wing and just hitting some nice jump shots. So when they were trying to put me in the post, then I knew I was way out of my league. I mean, to have to get that physical. So volleyball seemed to be, where I was trending towards, if you will. And it was amazing how the skills were totally transferable. Not totally transferable, but like we were running a fast offense, and, my position, I was able to use that athleticism, but also the skills, I sort of honed in basketball. And we would run plays where you're basically like mimicking the steps of a layup, before, spiking the ball. And so that was really cool and exciting for me, to just sort of have that new spark. And then, like I said, playing on one of the best teams in the state with, the best player in the state at the time, and our setter, which is like the quarterback of the offense. So that was really exciting. We went to state championship my junior year, and we lost to sort of our rivals at the time, Woodward Academy. And then my senior year, there were 6 of us seniors on the team. We won, and it was awesome.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it was so fun. And I mean, credit to Anna Bush, our coach, because, after that junior year, she's the one that got us in the gym, and we had a beautiful facility to strength train at Marist, and a great strength training coach. But it was her. I mean, no volleyball teams were doing that at the time, practically in college, let alone in high school. It was her that was getting us in there every day after practice. She would say, the average volleyball play is 18 seconds long. And so we need to be able to perform at our peak for that amount of time consistently. And so we started doing like Olympic lifting and learning the form and all that kind of stuff, and maxing out, and, doing summer workouts and coming back in preseason and seeing who was the best. It was really special. And then, that whole group of girls and the parents, I mean, the parents were all about it. So to take that all the way to the state championship was pretty fun, and a good way to go out as a senior.
I bet. I mean, that's what better way could you go out, than as state champion. And then, looking forward to knowing, of course, a chapter of your life was closing, but that your volleyball career wasn't over, being able to look forward and rely on that and know that something even potentially even bigger and better was coming up. And so then, Allie, coming up on the closing of high school and looking forward to college, how did you navigate that transition from being a high school player into being a collegiate player? And I mean, at the Division I level, no less.
Yeah, it was tough. So, simultaneously with my high school team those years, I continued to play club for A5, and going into the 17th year, that's kind of the year that, just based on your age, a lot of, college coaches are kind of coming out of the woodwork. And so I, tried out, and I didn't make, one of the 17th teams. I made the 18th team with Bob as the coach. So basically like the leader of the club, which is invaluable. I mean, he's, one of the best coaches, along with Anna. And so I was super excited to be on his team, but also knowing that at that point, as we went around to all the tournaments, the 18s courts basically have people that, if they can play at the next level, they're committed, right? Because that's their final year. But so, we played that season, and, I would get letters in the mail, and, some coaches would come up to me at the tournaments. But I kind of was still trying to figure out, like, can I play at a dream school, or, do I start targeting smaller schools, or, how does that go about? So I made, at the time, it was like on a VHS, a skills video, and, made copies myself and wrote the cover letters. And, I knew I wanted to go to a Catholic school, and I thought that, going to the Northeast and with all the big cities around there, that would be a good place to land. So I started kind of sending those out. It's almost like trying to find a job. A lot of it's like just throwing it out there, a resume, and, some cold calls, trying to get people to take a look at it.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and, was pretty confident in, like, turning down any letters or calls from, coaches at smaller schools, like in Florida or Hawaii or like places like that. Like, I just, in my gut, didn't feel like that's where I wanted to be. And, credit to my mom. She spent the time and money to take me around to all my dream schools that I still applied to, and, might have gone to and spend a lot of money on tuition had they accepted me. But, as that process kind of fleshed out of, like, okay, where are you getting in academically versus who's interested athletically? And again, like, just the type of school that you want to go to, and is it a good fit? Kind of honed in on that, all right, I'm going to play volleyball, and it's going to be in this area, these types of schools. And it was really down to the wire. Like, I think a combination of my indecisiveness and kind of coming into the game a little bit later, I didn't decide until spring my senior year, which was really late, and definitely very nerve-wracking. But
yeah,
there were there were 3 schools at that time that were in contention, and I knew I didn't want to do a big state school, but also was a little bit self-conscious about going to a school that no one's heard of. But it really was a blessing how everything worked out. That Tom Hanna, my coach at Marist College, so I was going double Marist.
There you go.
So he had been newly appointed their head coach, and he fished my video out of, his bin of many videos that were dropped onto his desk, when he started the job. And he called me up, and, when I visited there, compared to the other schools I had visited, and, what they were able to offer, financially, but most importantly, in terms of a campus and just the education programs that they had, that's what I decided to go with. And it was really a blessing in disguise. And, I'm just so thankful that it all worked out, because, that school introduced me to studying abroad, which was never on my radar. Being so close to New York City, in the Hudson Valley, it was awesome. So I'm very grateful that everything kind of settled. And I don't know if that detailed the recruiting process great, but
you did. No.
That's how I ended up there.
Yeah, and I think too, it's kind of big picture, being able to know, of course, you gave everything to that sport, to volleyball, and then what it brought you in return. I mean, of course, you can reflect on your whole journey to date, but going into college, I mean, you said getting to study abroad, going to a new place. I mean, it allows you and opens up so many doors of opportunity if you're willing to walk through them. And it's so far transcends just what happens on the volleyball court. It's so many different things that happen because sports can allow that to happen. And it's just kind of amazing to think about.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah. I love that. So, Allie, I mean, then going to Marist, making that decision to play Division I volleyball, which is, I mean, it's immense, and then being able to have all these opportunities as you were in college, in these different ways. Did you know when you went to Marist that what you wanted to major in or what you wanted to do after school, or was the focus really just solely on I want to be a collegiate athlete and that's all my mindset is right now?
That's a great question. And that I was very decisive on. I knew I wanted to take a dual major in business marketing and sports communication. Always growing up, being a girl that can talk sports, everyone would say, oh, you need to be a sideline reporter. So that was kind of in my mind. Like, people were telling me that would be a good career path. So sure, let's dabble with that. But I had the influence of my mom, being an executive in corporate America, and that marketing sort of aspect that I just, listened to on our conference calls all growing up. And so kind of wanted to make sure I covered my bases if the broadcasting thing didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
So I took the dual major, and it was a blast. I mean, those sports communication classes and learning sort of the business behind that industry were super exciting. And, I was really good at marketing. I mean, in hindsight, I wish I would have chosen, something that was not up my wheelhouse, and sort of, because I think in undergrad, like, the majors are basically just helping you frame the way you, look at the world a little bit. So it worked out really well. I had great internships, and because of the dual major, I basically was trying to figure out how to fit extra credits in already a full course load and graduate on time. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I got introduced to the study abroad program at the school. And so I would go and, convince people in the business department that, I could go on the fashion marketing trip to Paris with the fashion program. And that would count towards my, marketing course, while we were either on January winter break or spring break or things like that. Or, I got to go to the Holy Land for my religion course, which was amazing and,
Wow. Yeah.
like, invaluable. So that's kind of how, I don't know. That was just such a tremendous blessing. I mean, no program at the time, from the athletic side, was like, yeah, we let you study abroad. But I remember, our coach saying that as like a big recruiting chip, like sort of an added bonus, mm-hmm. And being like, oh yeah, that's, not really what I'm trying to do in school. Like, I even knew what I wanted to do in school, but it was such a part of the culture of the university that everyone did it. And so he would let us leave our junior year, miss like spring practices to go spend a semester abroad. And then they had all these short programs as well. So, I was able to take full advantage of all of that while still playing, which was amazing. So in that respect, I'm really grateful for, the courses I chose and how it all worked out.
That is pretty amazing that your coach would encourage you to do that. So you would knowingly miss practices, but I mean, having that bigger picture again of sports is not, I mean, it's so important and it brings you opportunities, but it's not your defining factor. It's not who you are. And so you're going to have a life after it ends. So prompting you to make those decisions of getting those experiences, getting yourself out there so that you could see the world outside of volleyball, outside of Marist College.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really feel like I got introduced to, new things I love throughout that process. Before then, like, it was Sports Center on loop all the time. And, and then just getting exposed to travel and, different cultures and fashion and music. And, I think a lot of that's, part of growing up, and then also, the world changing and the access to content we have now. But, it really was formative at that time. And yeah, I was super, happy of how everything worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Allie, coming up then having the experiences you did playing volleyball in college, and knowing a path or at least a trajectory you desired to go down once you graduated, did you end up doing that? Did you end up going into sports broadcasting after graduation? What was that, I guess, when you did come up on the completion of your collegiate career? One, what was that transition like? And two, did you end up going into sports broadcasting?
Yeah, so it was cool. I was able to sideline report for our basketball teams on the local TV station in college.
Oh, cool.
And then obviously we had like campus TV and, a bunch of classes where we were exposed to all that. But I quickly realized that you really have to enjoy the sound of your voice on tape and, like the way you look and things like that. And then, a big part of that as well is, you have to be willing to cut your teeth in smaller markets. And basically, when it came time for me to graduate, I was excited to get back to Atlanta. And, my brother was entering his senior year of high school, and, my mom was still traveling. And she's like, you should come back and, make sure he's not throwing the ragers at the house. And, but no, seriously, I really was, excited to be able to watch him play football his senior year since, basically growing up, he was always coming to all my volleyball events because I was the older one. And then, I went away and didn't really get to see his high school athletic career until the end. So I was like, yeah, for sure. Coming back to Atlanta, and then I, was just trying to find a gig, and I worked for a great company that at the time, before, everyone could just live stream from their cell phone, was pioneering, technology that made it easily accessible and user friendly to live stream, with just, camera and a device and a laptop. And they were targeting the high school sports space. So, it was super nostalgic to come back and then kind of re-enter high school sports. But for them being the leader as a high school sports network, I really got to kind of get exposed to different production things, which is how I learned video and video production. Did a little bit of broadcasting just to fill in, but it definitely at that point wasn't something that, I wanted to pursue. And then, eventually got marketing and sales roles with that company being a startup and kind of being able to dabble in a bunch of different aspects and get a lot of responsibility really early. So yeah, I was really happy to get that position, and it was a lot of fun, working with former athletes and a lot of other younger single people. We had a good time. We would after work, go play football and trivia and just being around sports and other people that value sports that much. You don't realize how much you miss it until it's gone. And I think, in my high school, every girl played a sport. It was amazing, and you think everyone's an athlete and go through life, and then all of a sudden you're done with athletics, being fueled through the education system, and you're just like, holy cow, most people are not athletes. So yeah, that was cool. But yeah, so that startup experience and that video experience led me into another company, another startup that was more broader media, not just specific to sports. But there I learned, how to manage a website in the process of building one. So yeah, I was kind of dabbling in the new tech startup scene in Atlanta and, the digital media industry as it was kind of coming up out of graduation for the first 10 years post college.
Yeah. Wow. And I think you're touching on something really important, or a couple of things. But one is, it's so important to find, of course, the things you do like, but two, to kind of weed out the things you don't. So you had this mindset of, I want to, take a hand at broadcasting, reporting, but then realizing, well, that's not exactly what I want to do, but I can be a different role directly in that industry. And so it's kind of figuring out where you want to fit in and or what role you want to fill in that specific space. And so learning that, but then too, of course, it's, you have those aspirations and you get excited, you have this exact vision of where you want to go, but it's still, even whether you knew your athletic career was going to come to a close or not, it's still a grieving process. And so even if, no matter how much you think you've accepted it and it's okay, my career is over now, it's still, you said it, you don't realize how much you miss something until it's gone, and you're playing volleyball again, or you're running, or you're playing pickup basketball, and you realize, wow, it's that longing feeling for that, that community that you had. Like you said, you don't realize that everybody isn't an athlete until you get out into the real world, and not everybody's an athlete. And so you have to intentionally find ways to seek those people out and find that community.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, that's well said.
Yeah. I love that though. And then too, though, you have to be intentional about it, right? You can't just sit back and expect to be found miraculously by other athletes. It's like, how do you go out and find them? Which is, that's kind of a cool segue into what you do today with Tennis Lady. So clearly you had Allie, a take on, getting into the entrepreneurial scene in Atlanta and kind of getting a handle on different aspects of that. So then for you, did that ignite a fire then to want to start something and branch out on your own? I guess, where did Tennis Lady come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think you're right. Kind of being exposed to these early stage concepts and, what is possible to just build from the ground up. Definitely, exposed me to an entrepreneurial scene that I hadn't really seen before. Kind of always assuming the, standard path of corporate, where you go back and get your MBA and then get into a big firm and go from there. That just wasn't what I was doing and what was happening. So, I started to kind of get some inspiration. And, to your point about finding other athletes, when I came back to Atlanta, my mom would say that she's got a tennis match and did I want to come watch? And, in my mind, I was like, well, you've watched all my matches my entire life. The least I could do is come watch yours. So I would go, and I quickly realized that tennis was just an excuse to have, a fun little party. So I would go there. I would watch her and her teammates play, and drink their beer and have a good old time with the neighbors that I hadn't seen since I was younger. And then they were always short players, so they kind of planted the seed, like, you should play and be on our team. And for your listeners and those that don't know, Atlanta is the biggest market in the States, but probably globally as well, for adult recreational tennis players, because when Atlanta grew and the suburbs sprawled, very quickly as they were developing these neighborhoods, and even modest neighborhoods in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, they realized that they weren't going to sell the houses as well if they didn't offer swim and tennis communities. So almost every, neighborhood built at that time had tennis courts. So as people were moving to Atlanta, once, Delta became a hub here, and it became a very transient city, as all these people joined these or moved into these neighborhoods and everyone was new, that really was how community was fostered on the tennis court. And you would get people that, were athletic, but also people that weren't, but that was the social scene. So everyone started playing tennis, and there were all these leagues offered to support that at that time. So that's what my mom was playing, and then that's kind of what I started getting into. Her and I did a flex league, which is where you're placed in a division and you can coordinate matches with other people to try to get my skills up to snuff enough to join the like established Atlanta league that everyone was playing in for decades. So that's what we did. We did that for several seasons, and I worked my way up, and we won a city finals somewhere in there, which was pretty fun. But then I joined their team, and same thing, kind of worked my way into the team, like being friends with all those ladies, but also working my way up the lineup and being able to win some matches. Playing doubles tennis.
Wow.
And it was awesome. It really filled like a competitive spirit that, is hard to fill after organized sports go away. So It's cool that our town, has that infrastructure to be able to do that. And I also really enjoyed, being around different generations and, swapping stories and, hearing their their wisdom, but also being able to, kind of like share the same. And it was fun. It was awesome. So I kind of got in my head that, we're finishing middle of the pack all these seasons. I'm gonna captain these older ladies and I'm gonna take them to the playoffs. and so I did, and everyone warned me, don't do that, don't captain. And I didn't understand why until I did. And yeah, I mean, as the captain, you're like, we're fielding a winning lineup, and we're gonna go out there and we're gonna take all of our lines. And maybe I should back up, but like the way the established leagues in Atlanta work is, so when you are matched up with another team, you play 5 lines. So, it should be in order of, best players. So line 1 is like your top players, and then 2 all the way down through 5. And then within each of those divisions, or that league has several divisions. So you're not only matched up with people who are like of your same level, but you also should be matched up against the team at the appropriate line level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as a captain, as you're trying to put that together every week to make sure that you take, hopefully all 5 lines, but to win the match, you got to take, 3, at least 3. You're like, okay, like trying to field your best lineup. And then all of a sudden you get like texts and emails and calls, like every excuse under the sun why people can't play. And you're just like, what do you mean you can't play? Like, you committed to the season.
Right.
And you kind of like, again, just quickly realize that, not everyone has played organized sports their whole life, or, as adults, people got kids that they're running around to their organized sports, or people are getting older and they're injured, and like just things that you kind of weren't exposed to in your previous athletic career. You're like, this is this is different. I guess this is why we're not winning every season. So that's how the idea for Tennis Lady and coming up with a new league really started. Is, at first I was like, man, you could write a sitcom with some of these stories from the court or these excuses off the court. But then I really started to kind of get worried that, okay, as people are aging out of the sport and my generation is not getting married and moving to the suburbs when they have kids, which is where you discover tennis because that's where most of the courts are. Like, what is going to feed the sport, after this initial boom? And this was all pre-COVID. We're all very blessed that, through the pandemic, tennis has been declared a safe sport. So there's definitely some newer people being brought to the game because of that. But, those still aren't retained league players yet. So that's where the idea came from. I wanted to come up with a format that would keep the existing players playing and not have them, stop playing due to injury or stop playing because, they have too many commitments taking their kids to sports. or whatever, the common excuses are, too much of a day kill, like with all the 5 lines that need to be played, anything really. So yeah, I came up with the format for a league that we call Wind Down Wednesdays, under the Tennis Lady platform. And yeah, it was really developing in my head for a long time. And then, in my 30th year, I had the guts to try it out.
There you go. I love it. I mean, taking that leap, putting something into practice. And so, Allie, I mean, with what you've developed with Tennis Lady, and of course, drawing on your own experiences, and so wanting to create a league, create a platform that kind of answered all those questions and really addressed everything that you were seeing. Looking forward with Tennis Lady, where do you hope it goes? What are your aspirations for the league?
That's a great question. Right now, I am focused on getting as many of the existing teams that play other leagues, exposed to this league and transferred over to play it. We're growing season over season, which is awesome. Long term, I would love for it to bring new people into the sport. And I think the format definitely has the ability to do that. And as it's able to gain more resources, offer more introductory type programs that get people not afraid to try out tennis and eventually find a team that they can be on. So that's the goal for Tennis Lady in Atlanta in the near future.
There you go. In Atlanta, you said that specifically as if maybe perhaps it could grow elsewhere. You never know, right?
Yeah. Seriously.
Yep. I love it. So having those far-reaching goals, but knowing, like you said, back in high school, looking forward to you have to first, before you're going to make it to the collegiate level, you have to make it on your high school team, right? So it's taking those small steps, incremental steps in pursuit of that larger goal at hand. So where you see Tennis Lady maybe going nationally, it's starting here in Atlanta, and how you're going to effectively put those steps into place to make that happen, make that growth happen. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks, Katie.
Of course. So, Allie, I mean, with everything you've done so far, and I mean, I love this leap of faith that you've taken with Tennis Lady. And then, too, it seems that this is a trend throughout your own journey. I mean, walking through those doors of opportunity, maybe not even knowing what's on the other side, but just deciding you see something that you want to achieve and just going after it. So, reflecting back on this journey to date and looking forward, of course, with all these aspirations and goals you have with Tennis Lady and beyond, I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
I love this question because, as people say, you should begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
And there's no greater end than that. I will say really a shout out to Chris a couple episodes back. I really loved his answer of being the best version of himself. Because to me, that translates into, living in a way where you're bringing holy moments into the world. But I want to be remembered for putting my faith and family first.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.